Welcome to my channel, The World of Science Fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. The air in containment block Gamma had no smell. It was scoured of life, of dust, of the faint metallic tang of human sweat, leaving a sterile void that was colder than the regulated temperature suggested. Kalen felt it seep into his bones, a familiar chill that had nothing to do with the cryopipes frosting over in the sublevels. He stood his post on the observation gantry, his gaze sweeping over the scene below, a ritual honed over 1,000 identical shifts. His rifle was a comfortable weight in his hands, its stock smooth and cool against his armored glove. It was a weight he had carried in one form or another for 20 years, a constant companion through corporate wars and pacification campaigns that were given much cleaner names in the official reports. Below him, suspended in the precise center of the spherical chamber, was specimen 734. The consortium had designated it a non-sentient biological asset, a classification that made exploitation simpler from a legal standpoint. To Kalen, it looked like a shard of frozen lightning, a crystalline entity that pulsed with a soft, internal luminescence. It was a thing of impossible, geometric beauty, its facets shifting in ways that defied Euclidean understanding. It was held in place by a web of humming energy beams, a containment field that crackled with barely suppressed power. The official brief said the field was for stabilization. Kalen knew it was a cage, and a painful one at that. He could see the pain in the faint, high-frequency tremor that ran through the specimen's crystalline structure. Most of the other wardens didn't notice it, or didn't care. To them, it was just a vibration, a resonance frequency logged by the chamber's myriad sensors. But Kalen had seen enough things die to recognize the signature of suffering. He had seen it in the twitching limbs of wounded soldiers on the red sands of Cygnus X-1 and in the wide, unblinking eyes of alien civilians caught in the crossfire. This was no different. It was the silent scream of a living thing in agony. His contract had 312 shifts left. He counted them every morning. After that, he was done. A plot of land on a quiet agricultural moon. Enough credits to never have to hold a weapon again. That was the promise he made himself. He just had to keep his head down, follow the protocols, and ignore the tremor in the heart of the machine. He was a functionary, a cog, a man paid to watch and report, not to feel. The capacity for feeling had been burned out of him long ago, or so he had believed. The lights on the gantry flickered. A low, guttural groan echoed through the chamber as the primary power conduits strained under a sudden load from the main reactor. Down below, the containment field wavered, its perfect azure light sputtering to a sickly yellow. The tremor in specimen 734 intensified, its internal light flashing erratically like a frantic heartbeat. The pain was escalating. He could see it. He could almost feel it, a sympathetic vibration against the bones of his skull. An alarm klaxoned, a shrill, piercing sound that cut through the hum of the facility. A synthesized voice announced a level 2 power fluctuation. All personnel maintained positions. Stabilization protocols engaged. The voice was calm, inhuman. It did not register the spike in the specimen's agony. Kalen looked at the emergency control panel near his post. Protocol was clear. Do nothing. Wait for the engineers. Let the automated systems handle the recalibration. Interfering was a breach of contract, grounds for immediate termination and forfeiture of all accrued benefits. 312 shifts. He thought of the quiet moon, the feel of real soil under his boots. But the silent scream from the chamber below was louder than the klaxon. It bypassed his training, his cynicism, his carefully constructed wall of weary detachment. It was the raw, undeniable signal of a creature being torn apart. He saw the energy beams of the containment field begin to desynchronize, pulsing unevenly. They were not just holding it, they were starting to shear it, pulling at its crystalline matrix from a dozen different vectors. He made a decision. It was not born of heroism or defiance, but of a simple, visceral refusal to be a bystander to this specific cruelty any longer. He moved to the panel, his movements economical and precise. He keyed in his authorization code, then a string of maintenance overrides he was not supposed to know, learned from a drunken engineer years ago. The screen flashed a red warning. Access denied. He bypassed it with another command. He did not try to deactivate the field. That would have triggered a catastrophic alert. Instead, He accessed the harmonic resonance controls. The engineers kept the frequency tuned to a disruptive sine wave to prevent the specimen from gathering its own energy. It was what caused the constant pain. Kalen rerouted a fraction of the power from the field emitters and fed it back into the frequency modulator, forcing it to synchronize with the specimen's own frantic energy signature. He was not freeing it. He was tuning the cage to be less agonizing. A small, unlogged act of mercy in a place that had none. The screen flashed a confirmation of the new harmonic balance. Down below, the change was instantaneous. The violent, erratic flashing of the specimen's internal light softened to a steady, rhythmic pulse. The high-frequency tremor ceased. The sickly yellow of the containment field stabilized, returning to its cool azure. For the first time since its arrival, the being within the cage was still. It was not the stillness of dormancy, but of peace. A new feeling entered the chamber, a resonance that was not on any of his sensor readouts. It was a wave of pure, focused attention directed at him. He looked down from the gantry, and he felt the specimen see him, not with eyes, but with a form of perception he could not comprehend. And in that silent, crystalline gaze, he felt something that chilled him more than the sterile air ever could. Gratitude. And with it, a connection, a fine, invisible thread that now tied him to the creature in the cage. The klaxon fell silent. The power fluctuation was over. But for Kalen, the true emergency had just begun. The calm lasted for precisely 37 seconds. Then, a new alarm, higher and more frantic than the first, screamed through the facility. Red emergency lighting bathed the chamber in a hellish glow. Containment breach imminent. Level 1 lockdown initiated. The synthesized voice was no longer calm. Heavy blast doors began to thunder down, sealing off containment block Gamma. Kalen's act of mercy had an unforeseen consequence. By synchronizing the field with the specimen, he had inadvertently shown it the key to the lock. He had taught it how to resonate with the very energy that imprisoned it. He watched in stunned silence as the creature, now pulsing with a powerful, confident light, began to absorb the energy from the containment beams. The azure light of the field flowed into it, not away from it, turning its crystalline body into a miniature sun. A web of hairline fractures appeared on the inner surface of the spherical chamber. Then, with a sound like a world being born, the containment field collapsed. Specimen 734 was free. It did not explode outward with destructive force. It simply expanded, its physical form dissolving into a cascade of pure light that washed against the chamber walls. The light was not hot, but it carried immense kinetic force. The reinforced plasteel of the chamber buckled and tore like paper. On the gantry, Kalen was thrown back against the wall. His helmet absorbed most of the impact, but his ears rang with the impossible sound. Automated defense turrets deployed from the ceiling, their targeting lasers painting red dots on the expanding cloud of light. They opened fire, spitting streams of plasma into the chamber's heart. But the light was no longer just a cloud. It coalesced, reformed, shaping itself with impossible speed. It flowed around the plasma bolts, absorbing them, its brilliance intensifying with each hit. Then, it solidified, taking back its crystalline shape, but larger now, more defined. It hovered in the center of the ruined chamber, no longer a specimen, but a being of terrible and majestic power. Kalen knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his gut, that he had just unleashed something the consortium could not control. His radio crackled to life. "Warden Kalen, report. What is your status? What happened to the asset?" It was Commander Tice, his voice sharp with accusation. Tice had always viewed Kalen with a mixture of professional jealousy and contempt, seeing his quiet competence as a kind of arrogance. Before Kalen could answer, the creature moved. It did not fly or float. It simply willed itself to a new position, appearing before the gantry in an instantaneous shift of space. It was meters away from him, close enough that he could see the universe of light swirling within its crystalline form. The defense turrets swiveled, trying to track it, but they were too slow. One of the turrets acquired a lock on Kalen instead, its programming identifying him as the closest unauthorized presence to the escaped asset. Its barrel glowed as it charged a shot. Kalen braced for the impact, a grim acceptance settling over him. This was the price for his moment of compassion. The plasma bolt never reached him. A shard of solid light, an extension of the creature's own body, materialized in the air between him and the turret, deflecting the shot into the ceiling. The creature had shielded him. It had saved him. The invisible thread between them was now a tangible thing, a debt owed and a pact sealed in the heart of the chaos. Kalen, respond. Tice's voice screamed over the radio. Security teams are converging on your position. Do not engage the asset. I repeat, do not. Kalen switched his radio off. His orders were irrelevant now. He was no longer a warden. He was an accomplice. He and the creature, this silent, powerful being, were now trapped in the same dying box. The blast doors were sealed. Security forces were on their way. He looked at the creature, and it looked back, its alien consciousness focused entirely on him. He raised his rifle, not to aim at it, but holding it at a low ready, a soldier's posture. They had to get out. Together. He gestured with the barrel of his rifle toward a maintenance hatch set into the wall of the gantry. It was a long shot, a path through the guts of the facility, but it was their only chance. The creature seemed to understand. A low, resonant hum emanated from it, a sound of agreement. It moved to his side, its crystalline body radiating a faint, neutral warmth. Kalen blew the magnetic lock on the hatch with a single, precise shot. The path to Exodus lay open, a dark tunnel leading away from the ruin of his old life. The maintenance tunnels were a labyrinth of pipes, conduits, and humming machinery, a world away from the sterile white corridors of the main facility. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and hot metal. Kalen led the way, his helmet's light cutting a sharp cone through the oppressive darkness. The creature, whom he had started to think of as Xylia for no reason other than it felt right, followed silently. Her own internal light was banked low, a soft, ethereal glow that cast strange, shifting shadows on the grimy walls. Their initial dynamic was one of wary observation. He was a trained soldier, his every instinct screaming that the powerful being behind him was a threat. He could feel the energy it held in reserve, a coiled serpent of immense power. Yet, it had saved him. It followed his lead without question, its movements graceful and silent, a stark contrast to his own heavy, armored footfalls. They moved through the network for what felt like hours, guided by Kalen's memory of the facility's schematics. He could hear the distant sounds of the hunt, the muffled shouts of security teams, the clang of boots on metal decking, the faint whine of grav sleds in the larger transit tunnels. They were closing the net. Tice would be methodical, cutting off every possible exit. They reached a junction, a nexus of several tunnels. Kalen held up a hand, signaling a halt. He peered around a corner, his rifle raised. A security patrol, 5 men in full combat armor, was moving down the adjacent corridor, their weapon lights sweeping back and forth. Leading them was Commander Tice himself. Spread out, Tice commanded, his voice echoing in the confined space. It's here somewhere. The warden is with it. Consider them both hostile. Lethal force is authorized. Kalen swore under his breath and pulled back. They were trapped. The corridor ahead was a dead end, and turning back would lead them straight into another team. He glanced at Xylia. Her light was pulsing slightly, a sign of agitation. He had to trust her. He had to believe she was more than just a weapon. He didn't have to wait long. As Tice and his team rounded the corner, Kalen opened fire, not to kill, but to suppress. His shots sparked off their armor, forcing them to take cover. There! Tice roared. Open fire. A hail of plasma bolts filled the corridor, superheated energy that seared the air. Kalen pressed himself against the wall, the heat washing over his armor. This was it. There was no way out. Then Xylia moved. She flowed past him, a being of light and crystal, and positioned herself at the mouth of their tunnel. She raised her crystalline arms, and the air in front of her shimmered, coalescing into a solid barrier of pure, golden light. It was translucent, yet utterly impassable. The plasma bolts slammed into it and dissipated harmlessly, their energy absorbed into the shield. Tice and his men stopped firing, momentarily stunned by the display. They had been told the asset was dangerous, but they had not understood. They were facing a power that defied their understanding of physics. In the lull, a stray shot from a panicked guard ricocheted off the ceiling. It was a wild, unpredictable shot, tumbling end over end. It bypassed the main shield, heading directly for Xylia's exposed side. Kalen's combat reflexes, honed over 2 decades of war, took over. He didn't think. He acted. He lunged, shoving her with all his strength. His armored shoulder connected with her crystalline body, pushing her out of the bolt's path. He was not fast enough to get clear himself. The plasma bolt struck his shoulder pauldron, vaporizing the outer layer of composite armor and searing through the undersuit. The pain was immense, a white-hot lance that stole his breath. He cried out, stumbling back against the wall, his left arm suddenly useless. Xylia turned, her light flaring with an emotion he could only interpret as alarm. She saw his smoking armor, the raw, burned flesh beneath. The shield she had projected vanished. In its place, a wave of concussive force erupted from her, a focused blast that sent Tice and his entire team flying back down the corridor, their armored forms clattering against the metal walls. The attack was not lethal, but it was decisive. It had bought them time. She was at his side in an instant. A crystalline tendril extended from her body and gently touched his wound. The searing pain subsided, replaced by a cool, numbing sensation. The light from her hand seemed to flow into him, sealing the worst of the burn, stabilizing him. The bond between them solidified in that moment. He had taken a hit for her. She had defended him and tended his wound. They were no longer just a warden and his escaped prisoner. They were allies. "We have to go," he grunted, pushing himself off the wall. Now he cradled his ruined arm, his rifle now feeling impossibly heavy. He led them down another tunnel, away from the unconscious security team, deeper into the bowels of the moon base. Their escape had become a shared ordeal, and every step they took together forged their unlikely alliance in the fires of mutual survival. They finally reached the surface through an old, forgotten pressure airlock used for waste disposal. The moon Hephaestus 7 greeted them with a profound and lethal silence. It was a world of fine, black dust that clung to everything and a sky that was a star-dusted tapestry of perfect blackness. There was no atmosphere, no sound, no life. The only light came from the distant, uncaring sun and the massive, sprawling structure of the consortium facility behind them. Kalen's suit was compromised, a flashing red icon on his helmet's display warning him of a slow-pressure leak from the hole in his shoulder. He had maybe 2 hours of air left if he kept his exertion to a minimum. Xylia seemed unaffected by the vacuum, her crystalline form shimmering in the starlight, as if she were made from it. Their destination was a derelict emergency outpost, a relic from the initial survey of the moon, located 5 kilometers away across a plain of razor-sharp rock and shifting dust. It was their only hope of finding a working comms unit or, if they were incredibly lucky, a small transport vessel. The journey was a slow, agonizing crawl. Kalen's wound throbbed with every step, and the thin dust got into the joints of his armor, making them grate and squeal in the silence. The ordeal forged a new kind of communication between them. They had no words, but they learned to read each other's intent. When Kalen stumbled, his vision swimming from the pain, Xylia would be there, her solid form of support to lean on. Her body radiated a faint, consistent warmth, a stark contrast to the absolute cold of the vacuum. He found himself huddling close to her during their brief rests, drawing on her warmth to keep the encroaching chill from his bones. It was a strange, symbiotic reliance. He provided the direction and the knowledge of the terrain. She provided the strength and the energy to keep him alive. They navigated through a field of old, semi-active seismic mines left over from the moon's initial development. His suit's sensors could detect them, but barely. He guided them through the treacherous ground, his hand often resting on her arm, a silent command to stop or change direction. She followed his guidance without hesitation, a perfect trust that humbled him. She was a being of immense power, capable of leveling the facility they had just escaped. Yet here on this barren rock, she deferred to his fragile, human expertise. They finally saw it, a small, half-buried dome on the horizon, its metal skin scoured by decades of dust storms. The outpost. As they approached, a wave of exhaustion washed over Kalen. His air supply was critical, the warning icon now a steady, ominous pulse. He fell to his knees in the black dust, his strength gone. Xylia knelt before him. She placed her crystalline hands on his helmet. He expected her to try and force the lock, but instead, a series of complex images flooded his mind. It was not a psychic assault. It was communication, a direct transmission of thought and memory. He saw her world. It was not a barren rock like this one, but a vibrant, living planet whose very core was a network of sentient crystal. He saw her people, the silicates, living in symbiosis with their world, their consciousness part of the planet's geological and energetic lifeblood. They were gardeners, tenders of the deep planetary song. Then he saw the consortium arrive. He saw their massive terraforming drills, like obscene metal parasites, boring into the planet's crust. He felt the planet's pain as the drills disrupted the deep song, creating a dissonant, agonizing screech. The consortium was not just mining resources, they were lobotomizing a living, thinking world. Administrator Forlag, the man in charge of the entire sector, appeared in the vision, his face cold and impassive on a view screen as he reviewed the data. A subordinate pointed out anomalous energy readings, suggesting complex, sentient life. Forlag dismissed it with a wave of his hand, reclassifying the readings as geological interference and the silicates as non-sentient crystalline fauna. The lie was codified. The genocide was authorized. He saw Xylia, not as a weapon, but as a desperate attempt by her people to communicate. She was a vessel, sent to the surface to cry for help, to project a signal of their agony into the void. The consortium had captured that cry, misinterpreted it as a weapon, and had brought her here to Hephaestus 7 to study and control it. Her pain in the containment chamber was a magnified echo of her planet's slow death. The vision faded, leaving Kalen breathless. The truth of the conflict settled upon him, a weight heavier than his armor. This was not about an escaped asset. This was about a systematic, calculated extermination of an entire sentient species for profit. He was not just a warden. He had been a prison guard in a death camp. The thought sickened him. He looked down at his own hands, at the scarred knuckles of his gauntlet. Without thinking, his mind projected a memory back at her, a shared signal on the new bridge she had built between their minds. He showed her a memory from his past, from a campaign on a world called Viridia. He was younger then, a corporal in the Consortium Marine Corps. He remembered the orders for pacification, the destruction of a native village that had protested the clear-cutting of their ancestral forests. He remembered the smell of burning wood and flesh. He showed her the scar on his forearm, a long, jagged line left by a primitive spear, a mark of his part in the atrocity. He shared the guilt and the shame that he had carried in silence for years. He expected a reaction of anger, of revulsion. Instead, he felt a wave of pure, unadulterated empathy from her. She did not judge him. She understood. She showed him a flash of her own kind, of crystals scarred and broken by the consortium's drills. They were both survivors, marked by the same brutal machine. In the silent, sterile dark of a dead moon, a soldier and a star being found common ground in their shared scars. He now had a cause, a reason to fight that went beyond his own survival. He had to help her. He had to help her people. He found a new reserve of strength, and with Xylia's help, he rose to his feet and staggered the final few meters to the outpost door. The outpost was a tomb. A fine layer of black dust covered everything inside the cramped, single room. The air was stale but breathable once the emergency cycling kicked in. Kalen managed to get his helmet off, gulping down the recycled air. He found a medical kit and crudely dressed the plasma burn on his shoulder, hissing at the sting of the antiseptic spray. While he worked, Xylia explored the small space, her light casting a gentle glow on the forgotten equipment. He found what he was looking for, a long-range comms unit and a functional, if ancient, emergency shuttle. It was a small, sublight vessel, little more than an engine with a cockpit attached, but it was their ticket off this rock. As he worked to bypass the old security codes and prime the shuttle's power core, Xylia projected another series of images into his mind. She showed him the consortium fleet, a vast armada that had been dispatched to the system. Leading it was a state-of-the-art destroyer, the Retribution. And on its bridge, she showed him the cold, cruel face of Commander Tice. Tice's pursuit was more than just duty, it was personal. The vision Xylia shared was laced with the commander's own obsessive thoughts, a psychic echo she had picked up from him during their confrontation in the tunnels. Tice saw Kalen not just as a traitor, but as the embodiment of everything he resented, a veteran whose quiet competence was often mistaken for superiority, a man who earned respect without demanding it. Capturing or killing Kalen and reclaiming the asset would be the capstone of his career, the victory that would finally put him in the inner circle of Administrator Forlag's command. He was hunting them with a fanatic zeal. They didn't have much time. Kalen finished prepping the shuttle. They lifted off from the moon's surface in a cloud of black dust, the small craft's engines straining. As they cleared the moon's gravity well, the system lit up with proximity alerts. Tice's fleet was already in orbit, a net of warships waiting for them. The Retribution was front and center, a blade of dark metal against the stars. Warden Kalen. Tice's voice broadcast on all channels, smooth and confident. You cannot escape. Surrender the asset and yourself. Administrator Forlag may yet show you leniency. Kalen ignored the transmission. He pushed the shuttle's engines to their limit, diving toward a nearby asteroid belt. It was their only chance to evade the destroyer's powerful sensors and superior weaponry. The chase was on. The tiny shuttle danced and weaved through the field of rock and ice. Kalen's decades of piloting experience pushed to the absolute limit. Explosions blossomed behind them as the Retribution's cannons tried to bracket them. Shrapnel from shattered asteroids pinged off their hull. Xylia was a calm presence beside him in the cramped cockpit. She did not seem afraid. Instead, she was focused, projecting a new set of images into his mind, more urgent and terrifying than before. She showed him her planet, and she showed him her own potential. She revealed that her connection to the living core of her world was a two-way street. Just as she felt its pain, she could also channel its power. If she were pushed, if her own survival or the survival of her world were at stake, she could trigger a catastrophic resonance in the core. The vision was apocalyptic. He saw her planet crack open, releasing a wave of energy that would vaporize everything in the system. The consortium fleet, the colonized moon of Hephaestus 7, and the planet itself. It would be an act of mutual annihilation, a final, defiant scream that would take her enemies with her. It was a doomsday weapon born of desperation. The consortium saw her as a prize to be controlled, but they had no idea that their attempts to cage her were pushing the entire system toward oblivion. Kalen realized the chilling truth. This was an unwinnable war. A direct military victory was impossible. If they fought and lost, Xylia would be captured and her people would die. If they fought and were pushed to the brink, Xylia would unleash her power and everyone would die. The stakes had been raised beyond simple escape. This was now about preventing a system-wide cataclysm. Tice's relentless pursuit, driven by his personal vendetta, was blindly pushing them all toward the precipice. They found temporary refuge inside a large, hollowed-out asteroid, its interior a cave of glittering ice crystals. The shuttle systems were damaged, and Kalen needed time to make repairs. The silence of the asteroid, broken only by the hiss of the life support and the hum of the ship, was a stark contrast to the chaos of the chase. In this quiet moment, Xylia showed him one final vision. It was not a memory or a warning, but a solution. A terrible, impossible solution. She showed him the heart of her world again, the great crystalline nexus at its core. She focused on the primary terraforming drill, the source of the planet's agony. And she showed him a way to stop it, to end the conflict permanently. There was a focal point in the planet's energy field, a geological node where a consciousness could interface directly with the planetary matrix. If a sentient being, one with empathy and a will to protect, were to merge with that node, they could harmonize the planet's fractured energy. They could create a permanent shield, a resonant field that would push the consortium out, not by force, but by making their technology inert. The shield would stabilize the planet's core, saving her people. But the price was absolute. The individual who merged with the node would be consumed. Their physical body would cease to exist. Their consciousness, their very identity, would be subsumed into the planet itself, becoming a silent, eternal guardian. They would not die, not in the traditional sense. They would become a part of the deep planetary song, a sleepless, unthinking watchman holding back the tide. The vision ended. Kalen sat in the pilot's chair, the weight of the impossible choice settling upon him. Xylia did not ask this of him. She had simply presented the truth, the only path that did not end in total destruction. The choice was his. The silence in the cockpit stretched on. Kalen stared out at the starfield visible through the asteroid's opening, a spray of diamonds on black velvet. He thought of the life he had been promised, the quiet plot of land, the feel of real soil. It seemed like a dream from another man's life now, distant and insubstantial. What was that quiet retirement compared to the fate of a world? What was his one, broken life worth when weighed against billions? He had spent his entire career as a tool for the consortium, an enforcer of its brutal, expansionist will. His hands were stained with the blood of Viridia and a dozen other worlds just like it. He had followed orders, done his duty, and collected his pay, telling himself it was just a job. But the guilt had followed him, a constant, low hum beneath the surface of his weary cynicism. Xylia had shown him the true face of his masters, and in doing so, had shown him a mirror. He was part of the machine that was killing her world. This, then, was a chance at atonement. Not a glorious, heroic sacrifice, but a quiet, solitary act of erasure. To become a shield, a wall, a silent guardian. To use the very last of himself to protect something beautiful from the ugliness he had for so long served. It was a fitting end for a man who had lived his life as a weapon. He would become a shield. He began the old rituals, the ingrained habits of a soldier preparing for a final mission. He took out his service rifle and began to field strip it on the deck of the cockpit. The familiar clicks of the components separating, the smell of carbon scoring and cleaning solvent, were a comfort. He cleaned each piece with meticulous care, his movements economical and certain. He was not preparing to kill anyone. He was preparing to let go. He was centering himself, focusing his will for what was to come. Xylia watched him, her light soft and steady. There was no pressure from her, no expectation. She simply observed, her ancient consciousness granting him the dignity of his decision. He finished cleaning the rifle and reassembled it, the final snap of the magazine seeding into the receiver echoing in the small space. He laid the weapon aside. He would not need it again. He turned to face her. The cockpit was too small for him to stand, so he simply met her silent, crystalline gaze from his pilot's seat. He didn't have the words to explain his decision, and even if he had, they would have been inadequate. Their communication existed on a deeper level now. He closed his eyes and focused his thoughts, his intent. He projected his acceptance. He showed her his decision, his willingness to become the guardian, to pay the ultimate price. He held nothing back, laying his scarred soul bare for her to see. The weariness, the guilt, and the small, flickering ember of hope that this one final act would wash away the sins of a lifetime. A wave of profound sorrow washed over him from her, a sadness so deep it felt like a physical weight. It was the grief of a friend for a friend, the mourning for a life that would be lost. But beneath the sorrow, there was also a powerful current of respect and a deep, humbling gratitude. Her light pulsed once, a slow, solemn beat. The pact was made. The decision was accepted. They had a plan. Now, they just had to get to her world. Kalen powered up the shuttle systems. The repairs were temporary, but they would hold. He plotted a course, a suicidal, direct line to her home world, right through the heart of Tice's blockade. There would be no stealth this time, only speed. He gripped the controls, his knuckles white. "Hold on," he said, the first words spoken between them in hours. His voice was rough and used. Xylia placed a crystalline hand on his shoulder, and he felt a surge of calm, steadying energy flow into him. They were ready. The shuttle burst from the asteroid's shadow like a bullet from a gun. Alarms screamed across the Retribution's bridge almost immediately. Tice was on his feet, his face a mask of fury on the comm screen that flickered to life in Kalen's cockpit. "Kalen, you think you can run? There is nowhere in this system you can hide." "Not hiding," Kalen said, his voice flat and calm. He cut the transmission and pushed the engines into the red. The small ship bucked and shuddered as it accelerated, hurtling toward the shimmering blue-green jewel of Xylia's world. The consortium fleet converged on them. Laser batteries opened up, stitching lines of fiery energy across the blackness of space. Kalen flew like a man possessed, his hands a blur on the controls, weaving the shuttle through the storm of light and death. Xylia was his co-pilot. She projected tactical data directly into his mind, showing him the firing solutions of the enemy ships before they even shot, giving him the split-second advantage he needed to evade. She wrapped the shuttle in a thin, shimmering layer of her own energy, a shield that deflected glancing blows and absorbed the radiation from near misses. They were a single entity, man and alien, flesh and crystal, pilot and navigator, fused by a singular purpose. But even together, they were no match for the overwhelming firepower of a fleet. The shuttle's systems began to fail, one after another. The port engines sputtered and died. The hull integrity alarms shrieked. A direct hit from the Retribution's main cannon tore through their aft section, and the cockpit filled with the scream of escaping atmosphere. Kalen sealed his helmet just as the cockpit glass fractured. They were going down. He angled the dying craft toward the planet, turning their uncontrolled descent into a final, desperate plunge. He aimed for a specific set of coordinates Xylia was feeding into his mind. The location of the primary terraforming drill, the site of the geological node. Their final destination. The shuttle hit the atmosphere like a meteor, blazing a trail of fire across the sky. It broke apart around them, shedding burning pieces of its fuselage. Kalen fought the controls, trying to keep the cockpit section intact, to guide their crash. Below them, the surface resolved into view, a landscape of breathtaking crystalline forests and glowing riverbeds, marred by the obscene, festering wound of the consortium's mining operation. At the center of the wound was the drill, a monstrous tower of metal and smoke, boring into the heart of the world. They crashed. The impact was brutal, a symphony of tearing metal and shattered rock. Kalen's world went black for a moment. He came to, hanging upside down in his crash harness, the cockpit a mangled wreck around him. Xylia was already moving, her form unharmed. She tore the buckled hatch from its frame, and together they crawled from the wreckage. The air of her world was sweet and clean, filled with the faint, chiming sound of the crystal forests. But here, at the drill site, the air was choked with acrid smoke. Consortium ground troops were already swarming the crash site, their armored forms moving through the haze. Above them, a heavy transport landed, and from its ramp emerged Administrator Forlag himself, flanked by a squad of elite guards. He had come to personally oversee the capture of his prize. And with him was Commander Tice, his face lit with triumphant rage. He had survived the destruction of his ship, evacuating to the surface command center. "Kalen," he bellowed, his voice amplified by his helmet speaker. "It's over. There is no more running." Kalen drew his service pistol. His rifle was lost in the crash. It didn't matter. His fight was not with them. His fight was to reach the node. "Go," he said to Xylia, gesturing toward the massive pit where the drill descended into the earth. "I'll buy you time." She hesitated, a flicker of protest resonating from her. He met her gaze. "It has to be this way," he projected, his thought clear and final. She understood. She gave a single, slow pulse of light, a soldier's salute, and then she moved. She became a storm of light and force. She did not kill the consortium soldiers, but she held them back with waves of concussive energy, walls of solid light, and localized gravity distortions that sent them tumbling. She was a whirlwind, a one-being army, her power unleashed in a controlled, defensive fury that kept the enemy at bay but did not escalate the conflict to a lethal level. Kalen ran. He ran through the chaos, his lungs burning, his wounded shoulder screaming in protest. He ignored the plasma bolts that sizzled past him. His entire world had narrowed to a single objective, the drill pit. Tice saw him, and his obsession took over. Ignoring Xylia's larger threat, he broke from the main force, his personal guard flanking him, and charged after Kalen. It was the final chase. Kalen reached the edge of the pit. It was a vast, circular chasm, hundreds of meters deep. At the bottom, the colossal drill bit ground against a massive, glowing crystalline formation, the node. He began his descent, scrambling down the terraced levels of the pit wall. Tice and his men were right behind him, their shots chipping away at the rock around him. He was hit. A plasma bolt caught him in the leg, and he fell, tumbling the last 20 meters to the bottom. He landed hard, his vision flashing with pain. His leg was broken, useless. He crawled the final few meters, dragging himself toward the humming, luminous heart of the planet. Tice stood on the ledge above him, his pistol aimed. "It's over, traitor." Kalen ignored him. He reached the node. He pulled himself up, pressing his hands against its warm, vibrating surface. He looked up one last time and saw Xylia, holding back the entire consortium force, a radiant, defiant goddess of light. He saw Tice, his face contorted with hatred, and he saw the sky of a world he had come to save. He closed his eyes and let go. The energy surged into him. It was not pain. It was beyond pain. It was dissolution. He felt his atoms being unbound, his consciousness stretched across an infinite, crystalline lattice. He felt the entire planet, its deep song of life, its ages of memory, its profound and enduring strength. He was Kalen, the broken soldier. And then he was more. He was the shield. He was the guardian. He was the rest. A wave of pure, golden energy expanded from the node. It was not an explosion. It was a wave of absolute peace, of perfect harmony. It washed over Kalen's dissolving body, leaving nothing behind. It flowed up from the pit, silent and irresistible. On the ledge above, Tice's plasma pistol went dead in his hand, its power cell inert. He stared at the useless piece of metal, his face a mask of disbelief. The wave expanded outward, covering the entire drill site. The monstrous machine ground to a halt, its thunderous roar replaced by an eerie silence. The consortium soldiers found their weapons useless, their armored suits suddenly dead weight. On the hill, Administrator Forlag watched in horror as his command center's screens went black, all power systems failing simultaneously. The golden wave did not stop at the surface. It expanded into the atmosphere, a shimmering dome of light that grew to encompass the entire planet. It washed over the consortium fleet in orbit. On the bridge of the Retribution and a dozen other ships, engines died. Weapons systems went offline. Navigation computers failed. The entire fleet was rendered inert, a collection of helpless metal coffins adrift in space. The war was over, not with a bang, but with a profound and unassailable silence. 10 years passed. The event on the world now known as Kalen's Rest sent shockwaves through the galactic order. The consortium, its military power in that sector neutralized and the story of its genocide exposed, was forced into a series of crippling treaties. Its iron grip was broken. A new era of cooperation, policed by a more balanced galactic council, had begun. The Silicate home world was a sanctuary, a protected system off-limits to all corporate and military traffic. It had healed. The scars of the mining operation were being slowly reclaimed by the vibrant, crystalline life of the planet. The deep song was strong and clear once more. Xylia had become the ambassador for her people. She had learned to interface with translation technology, her voice a series of soft, melodic chimes that conveyed a wisdom far older than the human species. She stood now before the Galactic Council, a being of light and crystal, a living symbol of peace and resilience. She spoke not of vengeance, but of understanding, of the need for all sentient life to listen for the songs of others before raising weapons. Her words carried the weight of a world almost lost and a friend who had given everything to save it. Later, after the council session, she returned home. She stood on a high mountain pass overlooking a valley where the great crystals grew in serene, geometric patterns that shifted with the light of the twin moons. The air was filled with the gentle, constant music of the planet. She walked to the edge of the pass, to a place where a single, massive crystal rose from the rock, its facets perfectly clear and pulsing with a steady, golden light. This was the heart of the node. This was Kalen. She reached out a crystalline hand and gently touched its surface. She felt him there. It was not a mind, not a consciousness in any way she had once known him. There were no thoughts, no memories, no remnant of the broken soldier he had been. There was only a presence, a feeling of unwavering peace, of duty fulfilled, a silent, eternal watchfulness that permeated every stone and crystal of the world. He was the stillness in the air, the strength in the rock, the warmth in the light. He had not died. He had become the peace he had fought to create. Xylia stood there for a long time, her hand resting on the crystal, sharing the silence. The planet was safe. Her people were free. The cost had been immeasurable, but the sacrifice had not been forgotten. It was sung in the deep song of the world, a single, solemn note of a human soul that had become a planet's shield. His legacy was the enduring, somber peace that now reigned among the stars.